Hey everybody, Ayana here from Am.A-line Collections. I'm here on our second chat about open conversations and what's going on in the country and the states. And I have my lovely friends here with me tonight from the University of Alabama. These are my friends from freshman year. We're like family as usual. I have Stephanie and I have Erin. Hey guys,
Hello.
or ladies
Hey, how are you?
rather. I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Good, pretty good.
Good. So
Yeah,
just
good, thank you.
wanted to give you like a little jargon, I guess, about what we're going to talk about. So, just talking about our experiences and things that we've had in common or happen and what we all think that we can do to improve our current situation across the globe. So, wherever you guys want to start, an experience that has stuck with you, whether it's been from when you're a little kid, something you've seen, or something in your adult life. Either one of you can start.
Oh, that's a lot. Uh, um, well, just literally anything related to race or just.
Race or discrimination you've seen. Also, just how is your life going currently, even with the virus?
Okay. Um, well, I could probably keep you here for hours telling like each individual story, but just generally speaking, it's just a constant balance of like in some situations you wonder, are you being treated differently because of who you are, or is it just a coincidence? But it's just like over time that happens so often, and it's just like it might be what you're thinking, but you're too afraid to speak up just because you don't want to be like that person. As far as the virus goes, I would say it's debatable. I think I'm in a fortunate scenario. Well, depending on how you look at it, I feel like my life has not changed that much because I still have to go to work. It can be argued that's unfortunate, but I'm thankful to still have a job. Just it's different navigating the world now with the coronavirus, obviously.
For sure. For sure. And I totally relate to you on, well, okay, um, why are you looking at me like that? I'm pretty sure you've seen a black person or a brown colored person before. Okay. Hi, how you doing?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so anything other than the fact that you felt like you've been treated differently, maybe a standout situation. I know one situation we've shared together. We were walking to to the rec center. Actually, I'm gonna let you say it from your point of view.
Oh, well, you heard it better than I. I just remember we were probably, I doubt many people watching, or maybe they are familiar with Alabama's campus. I feel like we were kind of walking past like the Bryce Lawn apartments on the way to the
Yep.
rec. Well, you said we were at the Ferg first. And I believe it was like this white truck, and they yelled the N word at us for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And I think you let them kind of have it with a certain
No, actually, Mikey did. Mikey was
Huh.
pissed. I mean, he was livid. Mind you, Mikey is a tall white guy from Florida. Love him. Shout out to Mikey because he's an amazing human being. But he was livid. And I was like, chill, Mike. Like, it's cool. He was like, no, it's not. Like, this is not cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
And like obviously it comes from an evil place, but then there are times where I wonder if some people do that just to try it out or just to see if they can get away with it. And more often than not they do. And I'm sure you remember that same year another student was called the N word and reported it to the police, and it became like this thing that got emailed to us about, we don't tolerate this at the university. And I remember thinking, I didn't know that was something you called the police about, or if like it never occurred to me that our school could do something about it,
Right.
which I'm not sure if that's like, that kind of sounds bad that it didn't even cross my mind to get help about that.
Right. Also, with that, well, I don't know if it was the same student, but do y'all remember the chalking? It was the
Yeah, that was the
same.
same year. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was the same student,
Yeah.
but we did get like 3 emails that freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot. So, Aaron, what do you have for us? What do you think? I know you have a lot to say.
Yeah. I didn't remember that Mike was with you guys. I remember you telling me that story, Stephanie telling me after. I didn't remember that Mike was there.
To be honest, but
Yeah.
I just remember like it happening.
Yeah. I would say we were talking about this recently, me and Stephanie, talking about the frat parties and stuff. And I bring it up because I've just heard from folks who went to other colleges that had similar experiences that you guys did at fraternity parties. So in some ways it's easy to be like, we went to the University of Alabama, of course things will happen there, but then it also happens at like George Washington University or like Temple University. Like it happens at universities. I'm just naming those schools because they're northern schools, but that kind of experience can kind of happen anywhere. And in Alabama specifically, like you see change at Alabama happen so slowly and so incrementally. And even though you're in a place that has been the center of this kind of the civil rights movement and of like even standing in the schoolhouse door was like next to our dorm sophomore year, the plaque for that. So you're in a place that has all of that history and that should be like well aware of the kind of negative experience, even like the governor and stuff. So you would think that because it was more prevalent that there would be kind of a more open understanding of change, but instead you met people who were like, oh, just let it go, and you're like, this happened yesterday. Right. Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned our experience at frat parties, because I actually wrote about it in my blog. So like, I mean, that floored me. It was probably the third week of school or something.
Yeah. Something early in the school year.
Yeah, and then I came back home for like whatever break it was and met up with a couple of my friends from band class from senior year, and we were talking about our experiences and stuff. And they were like, "Oh yeah, have you been to these parties?" I'm like, I mean, yeah, I've tried, but nobody talks to me if I go. They're like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, at UVA or whatever, anybody comes. And like, well, it's not UVA, but at the same time,
yeah,
who even knows? I can't even explain it. I was so floored when it happened, and Stephanie and I were like, oh well, let's just go sit out on the curb until everybody's ready to go.
Yeah,
that was like the first time how would I word it? I think that was the most blatant display of me being treated differently for being Black that I had experienced. Like anything before that, it was more passive aggressive, but that was the first time where it was just like, out of all our friends that went to that party, we were the only two who were never greeted by anybody. And we truly were like wallflowers, so.
Yeah.
Any other experiences for you, Aaron? Even within your life? I mean, even with your background.
I would say that one of the biggest kind of impacts so again, we had a similar conversation only a couple of days ago. So we were talking about someone we both mutually know that on our senior year, I think, or like the end of my time at Alabama, she commented to Stephanie that Stephanie was her first Black friend, when we both thought that was wild, only because I come from an area that's really segregated. And I grew up, I grew up in an area that's really segregated. And even in high school, you saw we did have Haitian, Black, and lots of mixed different types of folks at our school, still majority white school. But when it came to Alabama, I would say I can't imagine that someone's experience if they never made a Black friend before, simply because I felt like Alabama, this is what I said to Stephanie, like my very first roommates at Bama Bound, 4 of them were all Black girls from Alabama. Brandon Hatcher was the first person to walk up to me and ask me if I wanted to sit with someone at Bama Bound when I was all by myself, a Black guy. And then Stephanie was my roommate. The first 2 nights we were hanging, I was like, how I can't imagine never meeting another, only hanging out with white people, because of, see, that's where it doesn't make sense, because you could be seems kind of life experience. And that's coming from, am I breaking up?
Yeah.
That's coming from a place like where, you know, my middle school didn't have any, I only had 2 Black kids in my whole school. It was a small school. Or, to me, it would have been easier to grow up on religion than you, especially. Like, but to go to Alabama is super diverse, people from all over the place, and then to go 4 years and turn around and be like, wow, I've never had a Black friend before. That was a little bit eye-opening. Even just talking about it like, reminded me how eye-opening it was. The kind of like, though this is a perfect nice person too, like I wouldn't describe her as like a raging racist person. So it kind of highlights even the minor ways understanding racism, starting with microaggressions all the way up to like police brutality, where they're just completely unaware of its existence because they just don't know anybody whose life experience matches that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's funny that
probably
y'all
a
went
big,
through
kind of conversation.
4 years of that. Sophomore year, I had a friend. I still talk to her. We're really good friends. But yeah, she told me, "You're my first Black friend." I was like, okay. I mean, it happens.
Yeah. Ayan, you're so nice about it. You're like,
I
wow,
mean, like, and Aaron was basically saying this, but it's just like, you know, I've never been like, I'm going to make this kind of friend. It's just like organically you move through life, and I just have a variety of friends from different backgrounds. So it's like a girl that we all went to school with somehow didn't have any friends of color, and it was like at the end of my junior year where she's like, you're my first Black friend, and it's like, to be honest, she and I weren't even close. So it's just
you're like we ain't though.
Yeah, so just like, I'm your first Black acquaintance, which is alarming, because it's just like I don't want to blatantly say you have to avoid people of color for that to be true at our school, but like you kinda
kinda. I mean, it's almost 50-50.
Yeah, at Alabama, super diverse school.
Yeah,
in general. But I also think that just living with you and talking to you every day, I remember things in freshman year that you would have said to me where I was like, he probably didn't mean it. Like, we had a professor. And I remember my reaction to you being like, well, it's just an example. And you like explained to me how awful it is to have that happen to you constantly. And that was something kind of that I didn't understand. And that it took like the same kind of story. It took like knowing someone explaining like, this doesn't feel good to be pointed out like that. So that for me personally, I think you benefit whenever you interact with other people. That's one of the reasons I wanted to go to school so far away from where I grew up. And that's one of the reasons me and you made friends with people who came from all over the place. Like, so I think you get to meet a lot of folks who come from different backgrounds, and that's part of informing your worldview, where it's important to stop and think about, like, from the perspective of the person who's kind of getting the aggression thrown at them, and that it happens endlessly. It can happen, being the only Black person in a room, and that can happen all the time. Like, that was one of the things that I liked about when we became RAs, that kind of training that we had where they spoke directly about like microaggressions and stuff like that to us. That was nice. It was nice to be in a conversation where other people are just kind of comfortable being like, this has happened and I didn't like it. And instead of people being like, well, maybe it wasn't intentional. You just got a lot of other, even if I didn't have that experience, you had so many other people who were like, yeah, that's happened to me and it sucks, that you could be like, wow, this should stop because it's hurting all of these people, even if it's something that like you think is innocuous,
right?
Like, or just making an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Ayana, are you aware of that story? I won't go too much into detail to give people practice.
I'm freezing it. Sorry,
I don't remember. Maybe at one point, but not right now.
We had this class. I forgot I'm not even gonna give the exact title of the class because that can narrow things down. But basically, I was the only Black student in the class, And whenever there was like a example of things in the past involving a Black person, I would be tempted to. So
looked at, yeah.
Yeah, or they'd be like, oh, well, slavery happened during this time period. Stephanie, what do you think? And like my final straw was like, I forgot what the general conversation was, but the example thrown out that day was, so if someone like Stephanie had gotten shot, like it wouldn't, like people would get away with it, or it wouldn't matter. Like that kind of.
Yeah.
So I spoke to that person after class, was like, don't ever use me as an example again. Like it's just awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful, really. I mean,
yeah.
Like, don't just single me out because I'm a person of color sitting here in your class or in this meeting room or whatever. Like, I'm a person too, just like you.
Hopefully that was a learning experience for that person.
Yeah, hopefully.
They were really apologetic. I remember that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it literally didn't occur to them that it was offensive. That was another thing when I said, don't make me an example. So yeah, I guess it was totally a learning experience for them.
Yeah, probably because nobody else has ever spoken up to them and told them, look, you're offending me. You're demeaning me in a way. So can you just stop? They probably just let him go and was like, whatever. Which we do a lot of that too. You know, we do a lot of, okay, just let it slide off your shoulder, even though later it might piss you off and then you're talking about it or you're fuming about it maybe 3 hours later, 2 days later, and like, you know what, I really should have said something, but it's too late. But it's never really too late. But
yeah, and it's a shame we even feel that way, but it's just like, you know, I do kind of feel like you have to pick and choose your battles. Like, you know, part of me is applauding people right now who are calling out like literally every single thing. They're like, and another thing 5 years ago. But it's just like, you know, when you're the one person, like in a given situation, if you start calling out everything, then people start to act like you're an issue or like everything offends you. But it's just like, I mean, well, everything you're saying is expensive.
right.
So, but hopefully we're shifting in a new direction where people are more open to having those conversations without people need to erase the fear of being seen as racist, because we just live in a world where we all grew up in that environment, you know?
Right.
And, you know, honestly, between Black people, there are some like biases as well. So it's just like, if you get out of the mindset of being afraid of being pointed at and just listen to what's being said to you, I think we can move forward.
Absolutely. What you got, Aaron?
It's probably really like particularly hard if you're in a situation where you're employed or at school a little bit. You don't really want to stand out as being a troublemaker amongst the class, but when you're working, it can be hard to point things out just because you don't want to be seen as like bothering people. I mean, just experiencing that as a woman, you don't want to be seen as like too argumentative or talks too much. That kind of thing can have a negative impact. That you have as Black women, you have that lot of types on top of it, and then you kind of put, like, especially me when I'm talking to like my friends that I went to high school with, people prefer not to talk about race, especially white people, at all, period. If they could go their whole life without talking, you start bringing that into conversation, like, for sure it's lost me friends talking about it, which is fine, but it's even bigger if it loses you a job though, right? Like, really, I don't find myself in situations at work where I need to talk about racism. I might find myself at a bar with friends where we'll bring it up, but you know, I'm not encountering it in my daily life all the time. But when you're afraid of losing your job over it, that would be a much bigger issue.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
I also think smaller things, like you said, talking about racism is really important. Talking about microaggressions is also really important, because like even small jokes that lead to this like prevailing view of Black men or Black women or Asian men or Hispanic women, even a prevailing that leads to an overall stereotype because it suddenly represents the whole group of people. That's how you you know, hiring practices or the school to prison pipeline. Everything is built off of like microaggressions to start with. So pointing out when people were like rude, making jokes, or saying things that are hurtful is important, and it should start when you're young. With it doesn't, like, I think people's biggest fear is they're like, I was like a little shit when I was in high school, and if we turn around and like jail everyone who was a little shit when they were in high school, we wouldn't have any people. But the reality is that people get kind of set on that pipeline, and they're usually boys, black boys, get set on that pipeline to go to prison for doing things in high school that white boys get away with, or white girls get away with, for example. So when you turn around and say, like, if you can say to a high schooler, you can't say these things and this is why, you can't talk like this and this is why, we need to confront that starting as a child openly without fear, right? Like, kids make mistakes all the time. We don't kill them for it. That's kind of what leads to being an adult that's a confident conversation. I think that's built on growing up with people who you trust, who you can talk to. You would be able to talk to someone without offending them, hopefully.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and with that, talking about stereotypes, there's a lot of them, and when they do come up in conversation, but the thing that gets me most is when people decide to do overkill with the stereotype. Like, they'll mention it and then they'll keep going. It's like, why are you dragging this out? Like, it bothers me. It does bother me.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't continue the stereotype or be like, oh, this is the thing that gets me. And I mean, a lot of people do it and they don't know that they're doing it, but summertime comes or they go to the tanning booth and the next thing, oh, I'm almost your complexion.
Yeah.
Okay, like, as my brother would say, it's permatan, so
Yeah.
I make it comedic, but like, okay, that's great, but you have more of a risk. I mean, we all can get skin cancer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the largest organ on your body, but I don't want you to get skin cancer because you decided I'm going to go over tan in the sun or in the booth or whatever, just so I can get to be around your complexion and look like I have some life in me.
Mm-hmm.
Look like.
I wasn't expecting that to end that way.
or at least let's just like, okay, most people who do tan, though, that's their thing. Like, they want to look more lively, I guess. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but like, they feel really good about themselves when they're tan. They don't always like to be pale. They don't. I mean, even black people of fairer skin complexion. My mom, for example, she'll say, I'm so pale, I need to go tan outside. I need to go just sit out in the sun just a little bit. But she doesn't sit out like for hours. She might sit for, a couple minutes or so, just to get enough tan. So, I mean, I understand if it makes you feel good, that's good. But don't come out and say that you're brown skinned, black, dark skinned, light skinned, whatever variation of complexion you are, and be like, hey, I'm almost your skin tone.
And then what's crazy about that is, I recall when I worked at the Y, I was about 17. I worked at an outdoor sport. Well, it wasn't sports, but it was just like an outdoorsy YMCA camp. We had different YMCA branches in Montgomery. And obviously, if you're outside every day during the summer, regardless of your complexion, you're going to get darker. I'm already black and I got darker. It's gonna happen. But I just remember that summer people would be like, oh wow, you're like really dark. And it's just like, yeah, that's gonna happen if you're outside every single day. But it kind of felt like you were dark enough already, right, and you were worse. Like, that's kind of the tone I would get, and not just from white people, like from black people too. But still, it's just bothersome because I'm just like, hold on, people, like you're pointing out, go outside wanting to get a tan, but I guess there's a certain like stopping point where it's like, okay, you guys don't need to, we need tans or something like that. So it's just weird how some people did. I'm sure back then I I verbally said, well, what's wrong with that? And they're like, oh, nothing. But it's just like, if I had, I guess, not even courage to speak up, because I did, it was just, I didn't word it as well as I do now. Now I can say, oh, that's problematic and here's why. But back then I'm just like, you're being mean. But
yeah.
I mean, it's a hard topic to talk about. I mean, I don't know. I've had that happen a lot, and I'm just like, okay. And it could be like one person I hang out with constantly, and then like, dude, chill out. But not even. I mean, just stereotypes like, oh, well, it's watermelon. One of my best friends from high school, she does not like watermelon at all. Not every Black person likes fried chicken. I mean, you can't assume just because, oh, this is the stereotype, it applies to everybody.
Yeah. Oh, and that reminds me, I don't know if you guys knew this, but just, you know, obviously things are coming out, and like literally every aspect of racism across the spectrum is being addressed. And someone shared how like that ice cream truck song has, you know, a background. Basically, the original song is about Black people liking watermelons, calling us a certain name we shouldn't be called. And I'm just like, dang, it's literally everywhere. I mean, I knew racism was everywhere, but it's just like, even ice cream trucks,
right?
You know, just like and it's just like, those are still being played. Obviously, the ice cream man isn't like out here trying to disrespect everyone, but it's just crazy how it kind of infiltrates like almost every aspect of life, almost. But
it does like feel very intentional, especially where I live. It feels very set a certain way. We do things a certain way, and then the defense of when, hey, maybe that should change, usually is like, we've always done it this way. And that's been the defense for segregation, for like slavery. That's been the defense for that kind of, for any type of progress, has always been like, well, we've always done it this way and it's been fine. We're the only one complaining about it. And that kind of thing leads to, sorry if you can hear my dog, she's
I liked creeping
she's I don't know what she wants. But yeah, I feel like when you're coming from a place of like not really being sure of what I'm distracted by her, I'm sorry.
Okay.
When you come from a place like I do, where you're not really sure about what's okay and what's not okay, to you saying like, oh my God, your hair, can I touch it? Or like making a joke or talking about skin tone, that's not intentionally trying to be mean. But that's also not the point, because if you flip it around and say like, the best example that I can come up with that might be relatable is like when you work retail and every single customer makes the same joke to you, and you're just like, stuck. like I like this, and they're making a joke about like getting the thing for free. So it's not even directly at you, you know. It's just like in general, and you have to keep smiling through it. And that person doesn't know that they're the 7th person to tell you that joke today. So it's not. You don't have to be a like burning crosses racist person to contribute to microaggressions that make life hard for people. And when you're unwilling to look at individual people as who they are, when you look at things like stereotypically across a race, that's obviously a huge problem. And it's really challenging for people to realize that that's the way they look at Black people or Asian people or Hispanic people, especially white. And I say this as a Hispanic person. Hispanic people do the same thing. It's really hard not to make a broad stereotype, because we like to categorize things mentally, but you have to kind of confront that internally, which is really uncomfortable for people. And that's why they don't like doing it.
Right.
The other thing that I would just mention is like, oh, hey, pup. The other thing that I would mention is just like the importance of intentionally confronting racism in your daily life is not something that you kind of get to a point and then you're like, I'm not racist, period. You're like constantly working against a society that is prejudice in lots of different ways. And when you think critically about things is the only way you're kind of able to see it. Because a lot, like basic thinking would say, grew up on Long Island. I live on Long Island. Basic thinking would say like, this school, predominantly Hispanic and Black, has poor test scores. This school, predominantly white, literally next to each other, has great test scores. The basic way of thinking is like, those kids don't work as hard, without really going into the, on this island, we have documented proof of segregation in terms of where people live, but also funding for schools, facilities, not to mention not even going into like jobs, and, you know, not being less likely to get hired if your name is Aaron versus a stereotypical name, or even like Jose versus Joe, right? I have a friend who changed his name to Joe on his resume for obvious reasons. Wow. That kind of thing is all contributing to low test scores. It's way more complicated than what we just think it is. And it's systemic, and it's layered through things, layered through our whole system, the way we've built this country. And it's not just America, obviously, but, you know, I think it's important to think about it more broadly. And you as a white or white passing person benefit from a society that is built to prop you up at the detriment of people of color on a regular basis. So you don't have to be you can have Black friends and you still benefit from a racist society and don't see the need to change that society because it would no longer benefit you. That's just as bad to me anyway, as being, at least the guys waving the Confederate flag tell you they're assholes. The people that will like smile and invite you to their birthday party, but then turn around and like do nothing when confronted with racism or the opportunity to make a change, you know, who don't want those people moving into their neighborhood, but you're okay because you're different. And because I know you, that's basically what they come up with. That kind of thing is probably bigger.
I mean, that goes along with being a token.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And that's why I don't bother with the whole, my best friend is Black, because it's like people are always going to give it, like, look at an individual differently than like a broad look at a whole group of people. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
for sure. So winding it down, just wanted to because, you know, we literally can go on about this forever. We literally have these conversations all the time, have since we've met. Literally, Aaron and I met at the like out of state students, out of country students thing, and she forgot she met me. And
I'm terrible.
I met Stephanie at Am.A-Bound at orientation at the credit union. And then it was just so crazy and funny that when we actually got back together, I was like, oh, she was like, yeah, I'm over at Harris Hall. You can come over, meet my roommate. And I met you. I was like, I just met you like an hour ago. I don't remember.
I was like, I don't remember you. Sorry.
Right.
The only person I remember meeting from the out-of-state student meeting is Alex. Because
because it was between him and the guy from China being the furthest away.
Those are the only, and I was like, oh wow, there's someone here from Hawaii. Crazy.
Yep.
And then he lived in our dorm too.
But other than that, what do you ladies think that we should be doing other than having these conversations with our friends, with other people, to make our world better, to make our country better, and just relationships in general?
I think just continuing to confront things that I've previously might have described as smaller. It's just like, you know, things build up over time. So like keep confronting things at different levels so that it is standard to have conversations like this and not be afraid anymore on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Similarly, I think it's important to kind of to realize that like if someone tells you something you said offended them, it's not a time to dig in and be like, no, it wasn't racist, here's why. And that's kind of important coming from like a white passing perspective. You would say like you want to be open to change, and if someone is telling you something is offending them, it's always better to listen and find out why. Even if you turn around later and you're just like, they're being sensitive, I think that if you start that conversation from there being sensitive, you're not going anywhere. If you sit here and say like, maybe I hurt someone's feelings and I need to understand how, that's the way you grow as a person. You can only control yourself. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Good point. Where was I going? My brain is
Kind
almost
of
shot.
losing the internet.
Right? No, you're fine. But no, great point both ways. I mean, on a last conversation, it was you can't discount somebody else's experiences. So sitting down to listen and not just thinking, oh, well, you're sensitive or, confronting the actual situation, people have to remember, don't take offense, don't get defensive. Just listen, take a breath, slow it down. Nobody's coming at you. But everybody on both sides has to be receptive and not ready to fight. I mean, it is a fight, but it doesn't have to get as escalated, like rioting, for example. Protesting, yes, you're doing the right thing. Rioting and violence isn't necessarily the answer. You have to find a proactive, progressive way to make your point. And I think a lot of people, by having these conversations, saying what needs to be said, walking, protesting, just making petitions and doing larger work is really what we should be doing. And I really appreciate you all agreeing to talk with me today. I mean, it's big and it's important even for my brand. I felt, well, why am I not going to have these conversations or even speak out on my side? I am a Black woman. Yes, I have a lot behind me, but there's a lot more to it. And my brand is about building community and building upon the human experience. That's all this is. So I just needed to share that with y'all. And I really, really do thank y'all for agreeing to speak. I mean, y'all made some great points, so I really appreciate it. And I hope all the viewers that we do have accepted this and appreciated it as well.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
Thank you.